ギフテッドと呼ばれることもある才能やポテンシャルの高い生徒のニーズを国が認めて1年になろうとしています。文科省は定期的に有識者会議を開き、関連分野の研究者や実践者の知見や意見を得てきました。国は日本の教育をすべての生徒に良いよう、どの子も取り残さぬよう変えていこうと動いているようです。その未来の教育は、個別最適な学び、共同的な学びと言われています。日本は共同的な学びは比較的得意としていますが、個別最適な学びは学校という場では難しいのではという印象です。その点も含めて、ギフテッド教育、個別化・個性化教育のパイオニアにお話を伺ってみたく思いました。
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Maya. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you. And thank you so much for arranging this session.
No, thank
Sally will be.
So true. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the time to share the information. And I think I'd like to ask some questions. Sally, no, Dr. Reese.
Yeah, Sally is fine.
Sally.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing good. Thank you. Surviving.
Yeah.
So, should I just go from the
Sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
So many people, it's related to what Joe has just said, but many in Japan believe that personalized learning with differentiated instruction is difficult or even impossible to do it at school setting. So is it really difficult? Is it impossible at school, in the school system?
No, it isn't impossible. And as Joe mentioned, it certainly is easier with help from a technology system like Renzulli Learning. But even if you don't have a system like that, or you're not able to use one yet, it still isn't impossible. There are students in classes that are reading years ahead of other children, and by pre-assessing, teachers can identify which students have these advanced skills and give them different work or give them options of reading different things. Different assignments, 2 or 3 assignments can be given for choice instead of one assignment. Letting students pursue interest-based projects occasionally in school can be done. Letting students work with other students on projects that they select. So it is not easy to do well all of the time, but
Right.
it is important that it's done sometime, and it is certainly not impossible. Even as a middle school teacher with 120 students, I use some differentiated instruction, and I compacted curriculum, eliminating content for students that already know how to do something or know the content. And I also think we can use pre-assessment to identify students and place them into groups. So it isn't impossible, it is challenging, but it's necessary, or else some students will fail to make any progress over a course of a year. So certainly small steps can be taken, and then more steps can be taken. And it's particularly easier to do with materials and support from administrators and partnerships with other teachers.
The teachers. Okay. And then with other schools as well, probably in the school district?
I mean, certainly if schools in a district get together and decide they want to achieve something and they make it a goal, policies can be looked at, procedures can be looked at, various groupings can be looked at, and and there can be a seed change, a change in the way things are done to have more students have the opportunity to be able to experience more differentiated learning and content. So yes, I mean, those things also make a difference.
Sounds like it takes time. Did it take time in the States as well?
Yes, it did. And I think most teachers would agree it's a journey. And, you know, for very good teachers, you add different steps to your journey every year. You try different things, you experiment, you work using technology, you work with partners. You may even work by having students grouped differently across classrooms. So you have more students of similar levels of achievement, for example, at the very highest level achievement in a class together. But each year, there should be some effort made on the part of teachers to try to do teaching this way, because whole group teaching of same content, similar content is not going to provide challenge and engagement, as Joe just described.
Oh, well, first of all, is it like really different from gifted education and 2E education, like what you do?
I think it's not completely different, but the philosophy is the same. So twice exceptional students are students characterized both by their unique talents as well as very, very clear deficits. So all students have peaks and valleys. You know, some students have many more peaks than valleys.
Right.
But I think the difference with twice exceptional students is that these students have oftentimes, just disabilities that can't easily be fixed. So with students that are academically talented and may have some gaps in their knowledge, you can teach those skills and the gaps can go away. But with a student that has dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, or a student that is autistic, is on the autism spectrum, these are not things we can fix. So if you have dyslexia, you're going to struggle with dyslexia your whole life. It's not something that can be cured. You're not cured of dysgraphia. You're not cured of a physical disability. And I think that's the difference. So the twice exceptional movement is to understand that while all these students have very, very strong academic talents, they also have very strong deficits in school and disabilities that are not easily rectified. And so the movement that we've been working on is more strength-based. So what we want to do is to look at these students' deficits, but have them address some of their deficits using their strengths. So for example, if you are dealing with a student that has very, very big difficulties in writing, and they want to do an interest-based project, let them do an interest-based project and not have to do it using writing. So again, the goal of this is to highlight strengths and address deficits in a more gentle way, address deficits in a high interest way. So if you have to work on speech or writing, and these are deficit areas, at least let students do them in an area of their interest. So if you're passionate about animals or you're passionate about science, let a student use their strength areas to also address their deficits. And so there's some carryover from gifted education into the education of twice exceptional students, but the big challenge is that there are significant deficits, disabilities, as well as strengths in these students. And we need to understand we need to address both. We have to address both their strengths and their deficits. Well, many students with special needs, the focus is almost always on their deficits and never on their strengths.
Yeah, that's true. How do you develop their talent, but that the students have ADHD?
The students that have ADHD or ADD, one of the things that's worked best in our work over the years is to do what Joe suggested, try to find an interest area. If you have students with severe problems with ADHD and you can find an interest area, you'll often notice that their ADHD, their ADD is much less of a problem, because if they're doing something in which they have an interest. Let's say they're interested in engineering or architecture or art or music. If you can give them some time during the day to address this interest area, oftentimes during the time that students are addressing their interest, the ADD or ADHD is much less present. So again, it's engagement. It's trying to find activities and learning opportunities that are engaging and that are based on interests that can help address the other disabilities, in this case, ADHD or ADD. So finding interest, developing interest, and gradually working to increase time in these areas also makes a difference. But it is very, very difficult for students with ADD or ADHD to work in areas in which they have no interest, they have no desire to learn. So you want to try to do a combination during schooling, some time spent on required material in which there may not be an interest, but then also an equal or even greater amount of time spent doing things in an area of interest in a way that is more enjoyable. So if they hate to write, instead let them do something different. Let them record, let them act out something, let them do a simulation, let them do a project that's not writing based. These are the ways that we can use strengths and interests to address deficits.
Okay, thank you. That's really encouraging for the students with ADHD and the parents as well.
Right.
Thank you. We have time. Okay, I have one more question. From the again, on behalf of Dr. Matsunura, about your center. In Japan, in comparison, many TUI students have ASD. So your center currently runs Project TUI ASD. What would be the recommendations based on the project for primary and secondary education?
So Project 2E ASD is based on a federal grant that my colleagues and I received. We are going into our 4th year of it, and we have been very successful at identifying some of the factors that made students very successful in college. So what we did, Maya, is we looked backwards at successful college students that were both academically talented and had been identified as having autism spectrum disorder. And we were able to identify things that happened during schooling that made a very, very big difference, positive difference in their academic lives. So I'm going to mention 2 or 3 of them now. The first is they had opportunities to take advanced classes. So they were in honors classes, they had advanced opportunities for classes. Lots of students with autism end up in lower achieving classes, remedial classes. And these students all believe that their participation in honors and advanced classes made a very big difference. Second thing is that they were identified as having talents in middle school, elementary school, and high school. Somehow the mere fact that someone took the time to identify these young people as having a talent made a very big difference in their lives. So the fact that a teacher or an administrator or a school psychologist said, you are academically talented, you have these talents in these areas, made a very, very large difference in their lives. Another thing that was very important to them was that they were encouraged by someone to participate in extracurricular activities based on their interests. And again, we go back to Joe's interest. John Dewey and Joe Renzulli both talked about the importance of interests. And so these young people said these extracurricular activities, sometimes it was debate clubs, sometimes it was almost always individual, not group sports. So sometimes they ran track, sometimes they were in a coding camp, sometimes they were engaged and involved in extracurricular activities related to group projects like building robots. Robotics was big. Drama for some of them, not that they were on the stage, but they were tech crew. Many of them talked about how extracurricular activities expose them to other young people like themselves, and also they made friends that did not have ASD, did not have autism. So those are 3 areas: advanced classes, extracurricular activities, being identified as actually having a talent. And then the other thing that many of them mentioned is what Joe and I loosely call enrichment pedagogy. And enrichment pedagogy for a lot of these young people was they had the ability to do projects. They had the ability to work on working groups and on things that they enjoyed. They were able to choose some time in school to do something based on their interests. The kinds of projects that they did oftentimes in class gave them an opportunity to work on something in depth and not be in the regular classroom setting. So a lot of the pedagogy that was used was different for these young people. And they had teachers and counselors that encouraged them, again, to go beyond themselves, to make new connections. All of them found a connection with a teacher once at least in 3 or 4 years of school, and all of them had a connection with another student. So they all had at least one friend, and some of these friends emerged from their extracurricular activities. One other thing I'll mention is that in order to, in the United States, most of our competitive colleges, students go away from home and they are in a residence hall. So many of these young people had parents that as young as 6th or 7th grade sent their children away to a camp for a couple of weeks or away to a residential program in something like chess or debate or coding or astronomy. And these residential programs also help them to prepare for competitive colleges. So those are just a few things that we identified in our project.
Is it camps for specifically for 2E kids or just the regular?
Great follow-up. In many of the cases, they were not. They were regular camps. And again, these are very bright students with autism spectrum disorder. And sometimes during their academic year, they were grouped with other students with autism. But in the summer, their parents got them into another camp and they saw from their experiences how to do better with other students. They learned social skills, how to interact with other students that did not have ASD. So in most cases, it was Boy Scout camp, Girl Scout camp, debate camp, coding camp, and they were with students that did not have autism.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yes.
We have plenty. Yeah, we have time.
Okay, we have one more question from Dr. Matsumura as well again. Okay. So do you have effective way? Oh, okay. Hello.
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 In with the pillow here.
Okay. Do you have effective way of making use of student product in type 3 enrichment as a type 1 introduction of a new topic to other students outside of school? Like collaborative learning is also highly regarded in Japan. Is the online type 2 and type 3 collaboration of several students possible in Rendi learning? And do you have use of online type 3 student presentation as a type 1 introduction to remote students?
That's a very good question. If you look at the diagram of the enrichment triad model, you will see an arrow going from type 1 into type 3. But there's also an arrow going from type 3 into type 1. And I think that sometimes it's even more effective rather than having an adult visiting expert come and talk about paleontology, to have another student talk about paleontology as a type 1, because then they see someone like themselves that is actually a specialist in a particular area. And that's why that backwards arrow is in the type 3.
Let me just answer. And let me answer your question about using Rendi learning and the type 1s, 2s, and 3s within. So there is so you asked about the use of type 3 within Rendi learning. Can students work on type 3s across different districts or schools or classrooms or even countries? And the answer is yes. Built into the system is a way for collaborative projects to happen and occur among students from different countries, different schools, different classrooms. We're very excited about that. And there's also a way for students to be able to share their knowledge. There's a virtual type 3 process that happens. There are type 3 fairs, virtual type 3 fairs that happen. One thing that occurred during COVID in our country is that many of the opportunities that teachers and students had to learn how to put their work online benefited other students. So
Yeah.
there are multiple videos of children's projects and children's, again, virtual type 3 fairs. Also students doing videos for other students, for places, students presenting at banks, students presenting at libraries, students presenting out in public. So as Joe talked about the arrow from type 3 becoming a type 1 or type 2, that can be live or it can be virtual. And there are tools built into Renzulli Learning to enable this to be done virtually. Yeah, the profiler translates into multiple languages. So that's really already exists. Artificial intelligence made it fairly easy to do that. The difference is, of course, that many of the sites that students go to are still in English. So
however, students, schools can put their own resources in. You can put Japanese resources into it.
Yeah.
The only thing I would caution is that make sure that what you put into it is not just more information learning, but it has much more to do with projects and activities and hands-on kinds of learning. Otherwise, we're just using technology the same way we use worksheets.
Right.
Yeah, well, we would be happy to work with any of your ministry officials, because I do believe that the way that education works in most countries is, if the ministry is not behind it, it's not going to succeed. And so, and I know that Nobu has done some work with ministries, and I believe also that making some teacher training available is the key. The reason that our work has reached much further expectations than we ever hoped for is because of things like Confortute. Now we're doing more and more online training. We've made the videos. Sally's developed an entire course on the school-wide enrichment model, which you can get for no cost online. Again, you may have to do some translation, but I think that once again, when teachers realize that teaching can be fun, the 3 E's again, that they can get children excited and enthusiastic and happy to come to school, that more teachers would be willing to join in on this.
And, I would just also say in conclusion that we believe that the idea of SEM is about talent development, and that we believe schools should be places for talent development, and having a all school enrichment approach where students get different types of enrichment, but that all kids get some enrichment will help many, many more students develop their talents, because opportunities for, organized enrichment and follow-up are lacking in so many different schools, and students with disabilities and students that are very bright, and even students that seem like they're average achievers, but once they get excited about an idea and excited and enthusiastic about learning, that changes too. So we do believe that schools should be places for talent development, and that's kind of the byline for school-wide enrichment model.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, for taking time to share your expertise. Thank you.
My pleasure. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you. And then, thank you for your support as well.
Yeah. And on a personal note, I hope things are going better for you.
Thank you. I'm trying. Thank you very much.
Okay. Take good care. Thanks.
Thank you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
what time is it there?
It's 8:45 in the morning.
Okay,
Tomorrow.
you had to get up early.
I couldn't really sleep last night because I was just so, well, I didn't want to say nervous, but I was excited.
Yeah. Oh, nervous, excited, yeah.
Yeah, but
I was nervous about answering the questions,
You are?
Yeah, I get
Really?
nervous. Every time I do a talk, I'm a nervous wreck before,
I'm happy to know that because I was just really, really, really nervous. So after this question, after this interview, I'm going to go back to bed.
Yeah, go take a nap.